بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على خاتم الأنبياء والمرسلين، أشرف المرسلين وخاتم النبيين، سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. Dear brothers and dear sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This week we will continue our journey in the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to better understand, and to practically understand, and to understand with relevance these ayat in the Quran that describe and in detail present to us the facts, the undisputable facts about Bani Israel. As you know, Bani Israel in our contemporary times have caused certain rulers in certain countries, particularly those in the Arabian Peninsula, to bow down to them in subservience. The fact of the matter is, and I say this as an introduction here, the fact of the matter is that the rituals of Islam can no longer substitute for the core meanings of Islam. These Arabian rulers who right now are normalizing their relationship with the thieves, the political, the military thieves who have stolen the Holy Land, these decision makers in the Arabian Peninsula, they perform their salah, they fast during the month of Ramadan, and they do all of these other rituals that all other Muslims do. But the fact that they have surrendered to the Zionist criminals, their rituals can no longer vouch for them, because Islam at its core is a message of justice, social justice, equality, and equity. And so they have parted from that, and they can no longer hide behind their titles and their camera appearances to try to fool the rest of us that they are Muslim brethren. When we are explaining the meanings of these ayat in the enlightening Quran, we are going to the root of this issue. We are at ayah 124 and 125 in Surah Al-Baqarah, and we explained last week that Ibrahim, Prophet Ibrahim, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him and his, was privileged with the position of leadership إني the ayah, that's ayah 124 in Surah Al-Baqarah. وَإِذِ ابْتَلَى إِبْرَاهِيمَ رَبُّهُ بِكَلِمَاتٍ فَأَتَمَّهُنَّ قَالَ إِنِّي جَاعِلُكَ لِلنَّاسِ إِمَامًا قَالَ وَمِنْ ذُرِّيَّتِي قَالَ لَا يَنَالُ عَهْدِ الظَّالِمِينَ. We explained some of the meanings of this ayah, and let me add this week as a takeoff for the following ayat that notice in this ayah Ibrahim did not say, well, let me quote what he said in the ayah, and then let me tell you what he did not say. وَإِذِ ابْتَلَى إِبْرَاهِيمَ رَبُّهُ بِكَلِمَاتٍ فَأَتَمَّهُنَّ قَالَ إِنِّي جَاعِلُكَ لِلنَّاسِ إِمَامًا. قال وَمِنْ ذُرِّيَّتِي. Ibrahim's, after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to Ibrahim that I am making you an imam, a leader of people. And then Ibrahim said, وَمِن ذُرِّيَّتِي, meaning, and will you make imams or have leaders from my offspring. What I want you to notice here is Ibrahim did not say وَمِن أَهْلِ بَيْتِي. He did not say وَمِن أَهْلِي. He did not say وَمِن آلِي. He said وَمِن ذُرِّيَّتِي. And I want you to notice also, when you read these words, these are Quranic words. All of the words that I just used, which Ibrahim did not express, did not say, all of these words are Quranic words. And there is a difference in meaning between each one of these words. So when Ibrahim said, وَمِن ذُرِّيَّتِي, he meant, and from the posterity that comes from my blood and flesh. That's a dhurriya. If we wanted to take today's language, it would be something from, to get very technical with the word so that you can understand, because dear brothers and sisters, there's much confusion in the public sphere, and because these words have not been scrutinized, and because there's a sectarian understanding and misunderstanding of these words. So Ibrahim said, وَمِن ذُرِّيَّتِي, from my biological offspring. And Allah's response to that was, قَالَ لَا يَنَالُ عَهْدِ الظَّالِمِينَ. My pledge of leadership to you does not extend to al-Zalimin, does not acquire al-Zalimin. Now, this tells us that the values and the standards of Ibrahim is what counts. It's not his physical being. It is his character. Allah is making it very clear in these ayat. And remember, these ayat, I have to put them in context as much as I can. These ayat were revealed, as was the whole Quran, at a time when Banu Israel laid claim to the leadership of humanity. And that claim was founded on their explanation of it, that they are the biological descendants of Ibrahim, and through a specific and selective lineage of Ibrahim. They don't consider Ismail, who is the eldest son of Ibrahim, to be within that lineage. They particularly chose the lineage of Ishaq. Both Ismail and Ishaq are the equal sons of Ibrahim. Both Ismail and Ishaq are prophet sons of Ibrahim. But the racist, remember when we began tracing the history of Bani Israel about 32 weeks ago or so, explaining Surah Yusuf, and we detected, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us the information to detect and to identify in Bani Israel their racist, exclusivist, discriminatory, and superiority mentality and psychology. And they were guilty of this in the first family of Israel, Prophet Yaqub. The two names, Yaqub and Israel, belong to one person. But the name Israel is used when looking at history through a racist lens. The way the children of Israel look at their history. So they laid that claim throughout those centuries that we are, meaning the children of Israel, we are the heirs of the prophets. We are God's appointed leaders of mankind. These ayat lay bare this erroneous claim of theirs, and it goes to the heart of the problem. And here these ayat are making it clear to Bani Israel and to the committed Muslims and to the rest of the human race that leadership is not an inherited quality. Leadership is a privilege that is gained through passing Allah's tests of trials and tribulations in life. That's what the ayah 124 is explaining to us. So when Banu Israel say that we are the descendants of Ibrahim, and therefore we are the only ones who are qualified to be leaders of humanity. We respond to that with the words of Allah in this ayah that says, in the end of the ayah, لا ينال عهد الظالمين. My pledge of leadership to Ibrahim and to whomever, not all, not everyone of his descendants, the position of leadership does not extend to those who are oppressors, justice violators, offenders, and wrongdoers. My pledge, Allah's pledge of leadership, does not include those types. So the suggestion here in this ayah is, within the biological offspring of Ibrahim, there are going to be zalimeen. We are going to have oppressors and offenders. And oppressors and offenders are excluded from the privilege of leadership, from this imamah of people. And we go a step further and we say, okay, let's look at the history of Bani Israel. The history of Bani Israel, and I think this is something that many of the Israelis who view and read their history as such would say that Musa, the Prophet Musa, Moses, alayhi salatu wassalam, is more or less the central figure in their history. Okay, if Musa is the central figure, then why, we ask, and this is a very innocent and very objective question, why aren't Bani Israel claiming to emphasize, why aren't they emphasizing the offspring of Musa alayhi salam? For all practical purposes, they don't. And they shift, once again, just like they shifted their attention from Ismail, an equal prophet, with Ishaq, they shifted their attention from Musa and his brother Harun, both of them prophets. Just like Ismail and Ishaq were both prophets, Musa and Harun were both prophets. And notice their selectivity. They decided to omit Ismail as a prophet. You don't hear Ismail being a prophet in the history of Bani Israel. And so they emphasize the offspring of Ishaq, Yaqub, Yusuf, and Bani Israel. They don't say anything about the children of Musa, the prophet, but they say much about the children of Harun. Even the title Kohen, which is a very familiar name among those who are in the Jewish faith, all of that is trickled down from Harun and not from Musa. Where do they get? You would begin to ask yourself, where do you get this selectivity from? And I'm using the word selectivity to be kind. If we wanted to be factual about the matter, where do you get this discrimination from? you begin to discriminate between prophets, and then you begin to discriminate between the offspring of prophets. It's laid bare here for us in this Quran. And this issue of لا ينال عهد الظالمين is demonstrated if we just step outside of what may appear to some people to be a tense history, between the descendants of Ibrahim, the way they are looked upon by Bani Israel, and the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is presenting them with an inclusive explanation. Okay, if that is the case, let us look at Prophet Noah, alayhi salam. He had a son, and if the responsibility of leadership passes on from father to son, we find that his son was errant. He chose not to follow his own father. And it climaxed when Allah's penalty came due and the deluge erupted. The flooding was all over the place, and Prophet Nuh, the father, was in the vessel along with his followers, and he calls out to his son, Ya bunayya ta'al arkab ma'ana, O my dear son, come and ride the vessel or be in the vessel with us. قال سآوي إلى جبل يعصمني من الماء. The response of Nuh's son was, no, I'm going to take refuge in a high mountain that will save me from the rising waters. قال لا عاصم اليوم من أمر الله. The response to Nuh's son's reply was, there is nothing to protect you today from Allah's order when it comes due. فحال بينهما الموج. The high waves separated Nuh from his son. فكان من المغرقين. And so the son became one of those who drowned. And then after this very delicate emotional detachment of father and son, when you spend a little time with these ayat about Nuh and his son, it's really moving. It brings a father and a son to tears when they think about this. Anyways, Nuh says to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that his son belongs to his family. إِنَّهُ min ahli. And Allah's response to that was, لَيْسَ min ahlik. He is not from your family or your folks. Because ahl, depending on the context, can mean family and can mean folks. إِنَّهُ لَيْسَ min ahlik. إِنَّهُ عَمَلٌ غَيْرُ صَالِحٍ. He meaning Nuh's son is عَمَلٌ غَيْرُ صَالِحٍ. He is an act that is not good. إِنَّهُ عَمَلٌ غَيْرُ. So Allah is defining a person by what they do. It has nothing to do with their flesh And it has nothing to do with their blood. It has everything to do with their character and what they have done in this world. And the Prophet ﷺ wanted to expand this inclusive understanding that is not inherited or is not genetic. When the Prophet says about Salman the Persian, Salmanu minna ahl al-bayt, Salman belongs to us, the Ahl al-Bayt, the folks of the Prophet's household. Salmanu minna Ahl al-Bayt. So what we understand or have to understand is that leadership is not an inherited issue. Leadership is a distinction or a privilege that is due to a person who is doing Allah's will. And we explained how Ibrahim alayhi salam did Allah's will to the utmost and with distinction in passing the trials and tribulations that come with doing Allah's will. When he faced death himself, and when he was the cause to face death by his son, when they wanted to throw him in the fire, and when he was ordered by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to sacrifice his son. That's how when you challenge death, challenging death is the criterion for becoming an imam. So we go on to ayah number 125. وَإِذْ جَعَلْنَا الْبَيْتَ مَثَابَةً لِلنَّاسِ وَأَمْنًا وَاتَّخِذُوا مِن مَّقَامِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ مُصَلًّى وَعَهِدْنَا إِلَى إِبْرَاهِيمَ وَإِسْمَاعِيلَ أَن طَهِّرَا بَيْتِيَ لِلطَّائِفِينَ وَالْعَاكِفِينَ وَالرُّكَّعِ السُّجُودِ. Okay. وَإِذْ جَعَلْنَا الْبَيْتَ مَثَابَةً لِلنَّاسِ وَأَمْنًا. The word al-bayt, bayt means house. That's in the English language. And in the Arabic language, bayt is where a person spends his night. And because a person can only spend his night in a place in which he lives, if we wanted to literally coin a word in the English language, living place, that's what probably house means, but for you to move from the English language into the roots of the Arabic, al-baytuta, bata yabitu al-baytuta, it would be where you dwell and live, the dwelling place and living place. But when al precedes al-ta'rif, when the word the precedes the word bayt, al-bayt, and when anyone says al-bayt, that is a reference to Al-Bayt Al-Haram in Mecca. If someone were to say, Zurtu al-Bayt, I visited Al-Bayt. Al-Bayt here would mean Al-Bayt Al-Haram. And also this is a word belonging to context. But in the general sense, when the word Al-Bayt is used, it is referring to Al-Bayt Al-Haram in Mecca. So in this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not say, وَإِذْ جَعَلْنَا الْبَيْتَ الْحَرَامَ مَثَابَةً لِلنَّاسِ وَأَمْنًا. It was enough just to use that one word, Al-Bayt, the dwelling place, the living place. وَإِذْ جَعَلْنَا الْبَيْتَ مَثَابَةً لِلنَّاسِ وَأَمْنًا. The word mathaba is related to the word thaba, a place that you continuously, usually and continuously go back to. You see, by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaching us that Al-Bayt Al-Haram is a mathaba, a place to which people go to frequently. Thaba has a frequency in it. So this is, just understanding this word is a slap in the face of those who are trying to restrict and constrict movement to Al-Bayt Al-Haram. Any policy or any argument that says that only a certain number of people can come to Al-Bayt Al-Haram is in violation of this definition of Al-Bayt, which is in this ayah in the Quran. وَإِذْ جَعَلْنَا الْبَيْتَ مَثَابَةً لِلنَّاسِ وَأَمْنًا. Amn is a place of security, safety and security. I want you to pay closer attention to this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala designated this place, this Al-Bayt Al-Haram, the Kaaba and its surroundings, designated this place as being an area that is frequented by people. Allah didn't say وَإِذْ جَعَلْنَا الْبَيْتَ مَثَابَةً لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَأَمْنًا. He didn't say وَإِذْ جَعَلْنَا الْبَيْتَ مَثَابَةً لِلْمُسْلِمِينَ وَأَمْنًا. He said وَإِذْ جَعَلْنَا الْبَيْتَ مَثَابَةً لِلنَّاسِ وَأَمْنًا. For all people, this is a secure and safe place as per Allah's law giving. It's not some policy, it's not some ijtihad, someone trying to find the best judgment or the best jurisdiction of this place. These are Allah's words. وَإِذْ جَعَلْنَا الْبَيْتَ مَثَابَةً لِلنَّاسِ وَأَمْنًا. Notice that the word an-nas is also used in the coming ayah or so. Anyways, in another ayah in the Quran, Ibrahim says, فَاجْعَلْ أَفْئِدَةً مِّنَ النَّاسِ تَهْوِي إِلَيْهِمْ. Cause the passion, the heartfelt passion of people gravitate towards them, meaning Hajar and Ismail, his wife and his son. He didn't say فَجْعَلْ أَفْئِدَةً مِّنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ تَهْوِي إِلَيْهِمْ. So this shackling of Mecca is not justified by reading and understanding what Allah is telling us. وَإِذْ جَعَلْنَا الْبَيْتَ مَثَابَةً لِلنَّاسِ وَأَمْنًا. In pre-Muhammadi times, in the generations before the final prophet of Allah, this place was known among everyone of whatever belief, of whatever culture, of whatever religion, of whatever denomination, of whatever persuasion, of whatever ideology. This place was known to be a place of security and safety. A criminal would kill people and go there, and he'll know that he will not be harmed. It was forbidden even before the Quran was revealed. Still a lasting impression and a lasting practice going all the way back to Ibrahim and Ismail, that this place is a security zone. Al-Bayt al-Haram is, by Allah's determination, a security zone. Of course, if a criminal goes there, they'd wait for him to leave. He can't live there forever. There's going to come a time when he's going to step out of Al-Bayt al-Haram, and then they will do whatever they do to take revenge for his crime. It even happened on occasion that a person would see another person, a son, would see the murderer of his father in Al-Bayt al-Haram and would not touch him. And so that's the designation of Al-Bayt al-Haram. And remember, and this is extremely important to remember, that Al-Bayt al-Haram came into existence. Well, we'll get to this, I think, in a while, hopefully within this presentation. We'll get to it, how Ibrahim rededicated Al-Bayt al-Haram for future generations. So Al-Bayt al-Haram, Al-Bayt, was meant for all people. All people should have access to Al-Bayt al-Haram, except for the mushriks. And the mushriks, contrary to the translation of the word into English, and contrary to what is in the general mind out there, the mushriks does not mean Christians and Jews. Even though there is sometimes a common ground between who is a mushrik and who's a Christian and who's a Jew. But the word mushrik means those who have institutionalized and put into practice the deification and the authorization of others who are not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Those become mushriks. And in Surah Bara'ah or Surah At-Tawbah, Allah makes it clear that mushriks are excluded from this area that we are speaking about. But if Allah gives us time in the future to reach that point, we will explain this in more detail. Okay. So we understand up until now, bi'idhnillah, that affiliation with the prophets, the affiliation with Ibrahim, with Ismail, with Ishaq, with the rest of the prophets, is not an affiliation of land. No one is claiming Ibrahim because he lived in a certain geography. It's not an affiliation of race. No one should be claiming Ibrahim and the rest of the prophets because they belong to his race. The affiliation with Ibrahim and the rest of the prophets is not an affiliation of tribes or families or clans. The affiliation, according to, if we understand these ayat accurately and carefully, we'll realize it's an affiliation of character. It's an affiliation of conduct. It's an affiliation of how we behave, not how we look. And we understand from this, from these ayat, that some of the descendants of Ibrahim are going to be zalimeen. And that does not reflect in any negative way on Ibrahim himself or on the prophets who are from the offspring of Ibrahim. وَإِذْ جَعَلْنَا الْبَيْتَ مَثَابَةً لِلنَّاسِ وَأَمْنًا وَاتَّخِذُوا مِن مَّقَامِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ مُصَلًّى. In al-Bayt al-Haram, where the Kaaba is, there's a station there near the Kaaba called Maqam Ibrahim. And when people around the Kaaba, when they were offering their rituals, they used to have the area between Maqam Ibrahim and the Kaaba, they used to have that vacant. How and when did this generate in the generations after Ibrahim and Ismail? Allah knows best. But when the Prophet, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him and those who belong to him, when these ayat were being revealed, there was this area here that was left vacant. And the instructions came to make it clear all of the area around the Kaaba, including Maqam Ibrahim, should be filled with those who are attending their services there. In other words, this area here should not be left empty. وَاتَّخِذُوا مِن مَّقَامِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ مُصَلًّى. Musalla is taken from the word salla. And salla could mean dua, expressing a request from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَصَلِّ عَلَيْهِمْ, another ayah in the Quran says to the Prophet, وَصَلِّ عَلَيْهِمْ إِنَّ صَلَاتَكَ سَكَنٌ لَهُمْ. And if we wanted just to put it in simple language, and make dua for them, because your dua is a matter of relief for them, is a matter of composure to them. وَصَلِّ عَلَيْهِمْ إِنَّ صَلَاتَكَ سَكَنٌ لَهُمْ. The Prophet is not praying to them. He is saying a dua for them. This reminds me of some of the individuals back in what we used to call the old country when I was going to school there, especially in the Christian community, Arabic-speaking Christian community. They get confused when someone is saying as-salatu ala nabi, or salli ala Muhammad, or alayhi as-salatu was-salam. They think that when someone is using this word, that the Muslims are praying to Muhammad. And this is what results from not understanding the usage of words. First of all, not understanding the roots of the words, then not understanding the developments of the word itself, and then not understanding how the word itself is configured by the context that it is in. Sallu ala Muhammad. I mean, alayhi wa alihi salatu wassalam. That's an expression that is used very frequently. So the ear that is not used, the ear that doesn't understand these words, are going to say, what are these? These are Mohammedans. I mean, they're praying to Muhammad or things like that. This is what happens. This is how far the language has deteriorated among those who speak it, that they begin to misunderstand what the word or what the sentence means. And we say, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Ibrahim wa ali Ibrahim. And we have a salah, which is the technical salah that we perform. It has its definition, the ruku', the sujood, all the way from the takbir, when we say Allahu Akbar, to the taslim, when we say Assalamu alaikum. This is the technical salah. And within the salah, there is, within the technical salah, there is dua, and there is as-salatu ala nabi. Within this, 5 times a day performance. Salat al-Fajr, wal-Dhuhr, wal-Asr, wal-Maghrib, wal-Isha. وَاتَّخِذُوا مِن مَقَامِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ مُصَلَّى. There's two words in the Arabic language. There's muqam, there's a dhamma on the meme, and there is maqam, there's a fatha on the meme. When you encounter the word muqam with the dhamma on the meme, the first letter in the word, that means iqama, the place where you reside. Maqam with a fatha on the meme means qiyam. So there's a difference between iqama, which is a place of residence, and qiyam, which is a place of uprising. So here the word in this ayah has a fatha on the meme. وَاتَّخِذُوا مِن مَقَامِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ مُصَلَّى. Maqam is a place that was meant for invigoration. وَاتَّخِذُوا مِن مَقَامِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ مُصَلَّى. Maqam is qiyam, it's up. Qama is opposite of qa'ada. You take a stand. The opposite of you become static. وَاتَّخِذُوا مِن مَّقَامِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ مُصَلَّى. So Maqam Ibrahim was meant to invigorate, to activate those who are committed to Allah. So it defeats the purpose, as the practice was before the revelation of this ayah, to vacate that area. People should be there with energy. They should energize themselves, particularly in this place. وَاتَّخِذُوا مِن مَّقَامِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ مُصَلَّى. This explanation here in this ayah would have us rethink ourselves about the establishment of this bait, of this designated area of security and frequency by people and for people. And when you review the books on the subject, you'll find some learned individuals saying that Al-Bayt was built during the time of Adam, the progenitor of humanity, the first father that we have, our common father. Some people say it was built during that time. Other people, learned individuals, say that it was built during the time of Ibrahim. May Allah's peace and blessings be upon all his prophets. And there may be some opinions or some ijtihadat or some reasoning that it was built in some other time. Now let's take a look at this ayah. وَاتَّخِذُوا مِن مَّقَامِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ مُصَلَّى. وعهدنا إلى إبراهيم وإسماعيل أن طهر بيتي للطائفين والعاكفين والركع السجود. There's an ayah وإذ يرفع إبراهيم القواعد من البيت. It says, and bear in mind when Ibrahim was raising the foundations of Al-Bayt. This means that the foundations of Al-Bayt were there. So the square, the foundational square was there. So this may, this may explain why some learned scholars, they say that Al-Bayt was there before Ibrahim, and they may trace it all the way back to Adam. But when the ayah says وَإِذْ يَرْفَعُ إِبْرَاهِيمُ الْقَوَاعِدَ مِنَ الْبَيْتِ, it means that Ibrahim was giving this square, was giving it its third dimension. So he's raising, there were foundations there, but he was raising the walls upon this foundation. Inni أسكنت من ذريتي بواد غير ذي زرع عند بيتك المحرم. Ibrahim said that he has placed of his offspring those who were to dwell at your, meaning Allah's, sanctified Bayt. عند بيتك, your sanctified residence. Of course, when you go in the English language, sometimes it sounds a little awkward. Residence, oh, Allah has a residence. And yeah, it sounds awkward in English, but if you go back and you try to almost liberate some English terminology to try to fit into the Arabic language. There's another ayah in Surah Ali Imran, إِنَّ أَوَّلَ بَيْتٍ وُضِعَ لِلنَّاسِ لَلَّذِي بِبَكَّةٍ مُبَارَكًا وَهُدًى لِلْعَالَمِينَ. The first Bayt that was dedicated to people was the one in Mecca. Mecca is another word for Mecca. That was the first one, and it was, notice the wording of the ayah, inna awwala baytin wudi'a linnas, the first bayt that was placed for people, dedicated for people, assigned to people, given to people, placed for people. All of these, it doesn't tell us who. وُضِعَ لِلنَّاسِ مَبْنِيٌّ لِلْمَجْهُولِ. The verb وُضِعَ is of an unknown doer. We don't know. وُضِعَ لِلنَّاسِ. So here is where, to fill in the blank, here is where we can conclude that it was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who has designated this bayt for people. He has placed this place on earth for all of humanity. The details therein, were there angels involved, were there other human beings involved, all of those details we don't know. But what we, from reading this Quran and any relevant information to this Quran of ahadith or otherwise. So this is very important when you come to think about it. All other masajid in the world are constructed and built by a decision of human beings, prophets or people of individuals of virtue or societies of merit, etc. But this, the one we're talking about in Mecca, is Allah's. He is the one who dedicated it and had it built. What Ibrahim did was to resurrect it, so to speak, whether that's physically or whether that is spiritually, or whether it is both. And it is both. Inna awwala baytin wudi'a linnas lalladhi bibakka. Okay, so there are some details here that have to do with Maqam Ibrahim and Ismail, because both of them were the ones who gave this structure its third dimension. After having a length and a width, they gave it a height. So Ibrahim was standing on a rock there to give it a height, and he could only go so far. If he was standing on the ground, he could only go to his arm's extension and length upwards. But if he put a rock, which he did, to climb that rock, to stand on it, and then his son Ismail would give him the other bricks or rocks so that it could reach the furthest height possible. Remember, we're speaking about a desert. It's not a place where there's a lot of rocks. I mean, there are rocky areas, and they didn't have the instruments that we have today. They didn't have drills and all of this other technology. So you could fill in with your mind the daunting task in giving this structure a height. وَإِذْ يَرْفَعُ إِبْرَاهِيمُ الْقَوَاعِدَ مِنَ الْبَيْتِ. So Ibrahim was not satisfied only to have his height, his physical height, his body height, to have that with his extended hand. He wanted to do more than that, so he brought another rock to stand on and complete this in the best and most idealistic way, given the limitations and the inhibitions or the restrictions that there were as far as his bodily capacity is concerned. وَعَهِدْنَا إِلَى إِبْرَاهِيمَ وَإِسْمَاعِيلَ أَنْ طَهِّرَا بَيْتِيَ لِلطَّائِفِينَ وَالْعَاكِفِينَ وَالرُّكَّعِ السُّجُودِ. Inshallah, we will pick up next week where we left off this week. I beg and I pray that we all remain with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from Jumu'ah to Jumu'ah, from week to week, from year to year, and from generation to generation. And remember, what counts is your character and not your ethnicity or your race or your language or your color or your gender. What counts is the core of you, which is your character. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته وصلى الله على محمد وآل محمد.